Oh, fantastic. Councillors, it being 6 p.m, I declare the meeting open. The Shire of Capel acknowledges the traditional custodians, the Wadandi people, and their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. We pay our respects to members of all communities and cultures and to elders past, present and emerging. We have Councillor Scott on his approved leave of absence, and otherwise we're all here. Response to previous public questions taken on notice, we have one from Mr. G. Turner of Capel. That was that he asked the President and councillors of the Shire of Capel to support the group and request main roads of WA to carry out road traffic counts on the following intersections along Bustle Highway: Spur Street, Capel Drive, North and South, Stirling Roads and Halls Road, to assist in getting the Bustle Highway speed limit reduced to 80 kilometres an hour through these intersections. And the response provided is that it's our understanding that traffic counting activities undertaken at the requested locations are likely to be inaccurate. The traffic control measures currently in place at the Spur Street intersection in support of the Bustle Highway duplication works would likely affect both the speed and volume of traffic detected. It is best practice for post-construction audits to be conducted following large-scale projects such as the Bustle Highway duplication. The Shire of Capel believes that any traffic counts conducted in the follow-up phases of the duplication project, when it's opened, will be made publicly available via the Main Roads West Australian online traffic map system. It is therefore not considered necessary to formally request additional traffic counting activities specifically for the stated purpose of speed reduction. Main Roads will be undertaking data collection after stage 1 of the duplication is complete. In addition, we will be undertaking a safe systems review at this location. Please note there was a safety audit undertaken in July 2018, and this audit did not identify any issues in regard to the speed zone. The second question was that would the Shire of Capel support us by convening a summit meeting of representatives of the Shire, Main Roads, Minister for Transport, Parliamentary Members, Road Safety Commission, Capel Chamber of Commerce, Capel Road Safety Action Group and any others people who could assist to discuss the reduction of the speed limit from 110 kilometres an hour to 80 kilometres an hour, future plans for the intersections, merging lanes, and overall to make the section safer for people in the surrounding areas. Now there's a long response here which I gather has been forwarded to the... has a copy to the questioner. But basically it gives a background on the investigations that have been done and the fact that the Shire is has assisted and is assisting with those investigations, and due to the uncertainty surrounding the issues at this time, the Shire does not consider holding a summit meeting such as the one proposed would be appropriate until clarity regarding the future use of an adjacent lot of land has been determined, and the location, timing and design for any future interchange servicing to the town side of Capel has been firmed up, and so we'll leave it at that. And the long answer has been provided to the questioner. We now have public question time, and I believe there's some questions that have been submitted by which the acting CEO hopefully will answer, and they've been submitted by Mr. G. Bone from Jaloorup. Acting CEO. Oh, he's here. Oh, I thought he forwarded them for answer. Hang on. Press the button.
Thank you. Tonight I have 4 questions, and the first question is, when did Council authorise the employment pursuant to section 536(1)(b) of the Corporate and Strategic Communications Coordinator, and when did this person commence duties?
I'll refer these to the acting CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Bob. The answer to your first question. Sorry. Need a rubberneck. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Bone, for the question. The answer to your first question
The position was endorsed by the 27 February 2019 ordinary meeting of the Council. The commencement date of the officer was 1 April 2019.
So the person actually commenced duties a long time before it was actually sanctioned by council.
The position was endorsed by the 27 February 2019 ordinary meeting of the Council. Commencement date was 1st of April 2019.
Okay, all right, sorry, thank you. And question 2, when did council authorise the employment pursuant to section 536(1)(b) of the governance and risk coordinator, and when did this person commence duties?
Again, thank you for the question. This position was endorsed at the ordinary meeting of the Council held on 27 February 2019. The commencement date of that officer was 18 November 2019.
Thank you. Question 3, the nature of my third question is basically about minutes, agendas and attachments to be available on the Shire's website. And this question also relates in part to the unanswered question in the optional questions of the 2020 compliance audit return, which I understand the council will be considering later this evening. Part A. Why does the Shire's website now only make available, pursuant to section 596A 1F and H, 1. Council minutes since January 2017, and 2. Council minutes and agendas and attachments since January 2020? And B. Why are there no agendas and attachments available for the following meetings? Special council meetings held in 2017, there were 2. 2018, 4 special meetings. 2019, 4 special meetings. And 2020, 3 special meetings. Second dot point, audit committee meetings held in 2017, of which there were 3. 2018, there were 3. 2019, a further 3. 2020, there were 4. And lastly, the 24th of March of this year, 2021. Third dot point, Bushfire Advisory Committee meetings held in 2017, 3, 2018, 3, 2019, 3, 2024, and also this year, the 24th of February 2021. And there doesn't appear to be any minutes of those available yet also. Fourth dot point, Local Emergency Management Committee meetings held in 2017, 3, 2018, 2, 2019, 4, 2024, and have there been any meetings in 2021? Climate Change Adaptation and Sustainability Committee meetings of the 26th of April 2017. In 2018 there were 2 meetings, 22nd of May 2019, and in 2020 a further 2 meetings. And lastly, item C, why is there no record of any recruitment committee minutes held in late 2020 and to date in 2021?
Thanks, Mr. Bone. Happy to answer those. Mr. Chairman, we have taken the decision to only go back 5 years for information with regard to minutes and agendas in accordance with the local government administration regulations. However, there is a note on the website if anybody wants to go back further than that. We're required to make them available. We just don't need to make them available on the website. Any person can come and ask to see previous ones. To answer your second part of your question, and I thank you very much for bringing this to my attention at today's council meeting. On receiving your questions, we inspected our website and it was discovered that the agendas and attachments referred to by you were unfortunately left off during our content migration for the new website. They have been unavailable on the website for a period of 6 months, since November or December, and I have received notification this afternoon that that has now been rectified.
Thank you. And lastly, my fourth question. This question relates also to an unanswered question in the optional questions of the 2020 compliance audit return. And the question is, why has the Council not prepared a policy in relation to the continuing professional development of Council members pursuant to section 5128(1) of the Local Government Act?
Thank you, Mr. Bone. Shire Policy 1.6 Conference and Training Expenses provides a framework for continuing professional development of council members. The policy is scheduled for review at the 28 July ordinary meeting of the council, and I plan to take the amendments to the Local Government Act to the council at that time.
Okay. That concludes my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bone. I think we're up to Mr. Bernie Masters.
Thank you, Mr. President. Bernie Masters, resident Peppermint Grove Beach of something like 39 years. All my three questions, if I'm able to ask three, relate to agenda item 14.3, the Bushfire Prevention Order. Question number one, recognising that sustainability requires the social, environmental and economic costs and benefits of any proposed action to be assessed before a decision is taken, why has no community consultation taken place on the issue of how residents within the Shire can better prepare their properties to withstand the threat of bushfire, recognising the social importance to many people of retaining trees and other vegetation around their houses in order to provide high amenity and environmental values?
Yes, I'll pass you over to the Acting CEO for a detailed response. But before I do, I'll just let you know that the council has spent a great deal of this afternoon discussing the proposed bushfire prevention order. And there's a lot of questions in there that we are rehashing and working on. And we realise that in this day and age, with climate change and with all of the changing requirements and issues around bushfires, that we have to work very hard on getting it right and getting that balance right between community expectations, freedom, people wanting to exercise their rights to live the way they want to on their blocks of land, and the requirement to keep the community as safe as we can in bushfire seasons. So we're doing a lot of work behind the scenes, and we will be doing a lot more work. I don't know what will happen with the bushfire prevention order tonight, but we'll see. But rest assured that we are dealing with all of those vexed questions, and if we don't get it perfect this year, we'll be better next year. Acting CEO.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bushfire prevention order.
Thank you. The Bushfire Prevention Order is issued under Section 33 of the Bushfires Act 1954. The order is the regulatory basis for determining the minimum standard of bushfire prevention activities required by private property owners. It is the role of the Bushfire Advisory Committee that has representation by the Department of Fire and Emergency Services, Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions, local government and all of the Shire of Capel bushfire brigades to advise the local government on matters relating to the prevention, control and extinguishment of bushfires. It is not our usual practice to undertake community consultation on statutory or regulatory matters.
Thank you for the answer. My second question, same agenda item. With research conducted by the Bushfire CRC Centre for Community, I'm not sure what CRC stands for, but Cooperative Research Centre, that's right, showing that most people are killed in bushfires either as they attempt to evacuate or as they shelter in their own homes. What will the Shire do to provide better evacuation routes, for example, at Peppermint Grove Beach, where there's only one road servicing the community, and to better educate residents of both what they can do to make their houses more fire resistant, that is, in addition to the agenda item's sole focus on reducing combustible materials around dwellings, and what actions people can take during a fire to prevent their property and lives, or to protect their properties and lives, in other words, in addition to their early evacuation, a course of action that many people decline to undertake.
I'll ask the Acting CEO to respond.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Masters. The Shire of Capel recognises that Peppermint Grove Beach was a development that occurred with historical legacies of one road servicing the community between the town site and Ludlow Road North that provides egress to the north and south connecting to Bustle Highway. At this stage, there are no plans to provide an alternative access road. As mentioned in the answer to question 1, the Shire of Capel issues a bushfire prevention order outlining the minimum standard of fire prevention required by owners to mitigate bushfire risk in the community. Individual property owners are able to make decisions regarding additional measures that they wish to take to protect their property, but the Shire cannot necessarily regulate these. The revised bushfire order is aimed at ensuring that properties can achieve a minimum standard of mitigation to improve the capability of the building being able to withstand a bushfire and be considered defendable. Furthermore, the Shire of Capel works collaboratively with DEFIS, Fire and Emergency Services, to promote bushfire preparedness campaigns and the importance for property owners and residents to develop a bushfire plan for their family that reflects the risk of the area in which they live. Most importantly, if the risk is too high and they do not have the capability to stay and defend, they should leave early. Leaving early is a safe choice.
Very standard response. But, may I ask the third question, Mr. President? Recognising, again, same agenda item, recognising that most buildings, including houses, burn down as a result of sustained ember attack and not from the direct impact of a bushfire's fire front, what action will the Shire take to reduce the serious risk of significant ember attack likely to affect Peppermint Grove Beach residents should the poorly managed Ludlow Chewett Forest National Park be affected by a bushfire under severe or catastrophic weather conditions?
Acting CEO.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Mr. Masters. As referred to earlier, the revised bushfire prevention order requires owners to maintain a low fuel zone around buildings to reduce the risk of bushfire or ember attack that would impact buildings on the property. With regard to fire management of the Ludlow Chewett Forest, the management of this forest is under Department of Biodiversity Conservation and Attractions. That department has provided the following information. A trial burn plot was conducted to regenerate soil stored seeds and re-establish Chewett seedlings. The department aims to maintain fire access throughout the reserve, however, it is prioritised along with all other reserves managed throughout the district. Fuel loads are routinely monitored throughout the Chewett Forest National Park. Fuel loads were assessed as part of the draft Chewett Forest National Park Management Plan. Overall, the fuel loads were less than 2 tonne per hectare. Grazing pressure from introduced and native herbivores in conjunction with the forest type, that's Chewett and Peppermint, does not readily accumulate fuels to the same level as northern Jarrah forest. The potential for long distance spotting and above average fire risk into Peppermint Grove is reduced by the following. Low fuel loads in the Chewett Forest National Park and minimal ground and near surface foliage required to escalate fire into tree canopies. Rapid detection and response capacity from water bombing equipment located in Bustleton and Bunbury on either side. Then the presence of a large wetland between the Chewett Forest National Park and Peppermint Grove settlement gives us some hazard separation.
Nice answer. I don't think that the wetland makes any difference. Thank you for the answers, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Masters. We now have Mr. Brian Hastie. And Mr. Hasty, just before you start, I've been given some advance notice of the questions, the sort of questions you wish to ask.
Yes.
They're not really genuine questions regarding council matters, but I will allow you to ask them because I don't wish to be seen to be preventing you from asking them. But I will caution you that you may want to reconsider asking them. Think carefully about it before you do. That's all I can say.
All right, I'm just going to ask you the first. No, I'm not going to go through the first two things because I think they're statements. But I'm going to ask you that you've never been a volunteer firefighter, have you?
Mr. Hasty, that's not an issue that's not a council matter. It's not a matter for public.
Okay,
Question time.
that's fine. Well, I'll put it another way. You have stated publicly and through all sorts of venues like the ABC radio stations, etc., etc. I've come to, the freedom of information data that I've got here, which you've had advance notice of, shows that there is a degree of dishonesty, which shows that your suitability to continue in the office of President is no longer tenable, and ask that you resign from the Capel Shire Council immediately.
Well, all I'll say to that is that if there are any current or former councillors from previous council or their associates who are encouraging you in this kind of antic, they should be ashamed of themselves.
Well, there's no former council or anything else. It's just that I do listen to the radios, I do listen to everything, and I do take notice of what you say. And what you've said is that you were a volunteer firefighter. You've stated that as a president, and I put down that when you said that as a president in this locality here, that it is a council business.
Is that your question?
This is my response to your response.
Do you have a question?
No, the only question I've had is like I stated. If you can't answer that you've never been a volunteer firefighter, and I've made exhaustive inquiries down Manjimup, Bridgetown, Boyer, Brook, everywhere else, and no one's ever heard of you being a volunteer firefighter. What have you got to say to that?
Okay. Have you finished?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right.
Right, we need a motion to record the vote of all members present. Councillor Clues, seconded Councillor Andrew, and I think it's up there that's about recording the vote of all members present following each vote at this meeting of council. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Are there any applications for leave of absence? Declarations of interest, I don't have any in front of me. Are there any now? Yes, Councillor Andrew would like to declare an interest in a proximity interest, is it? That she lives near Ramsey Road, which is coming up in an item, but we'll get the paperwork done. Notice of items to be discussed behind closed doors. Acting CEO. Confirmation of minutes from the ordinary meeting of council 31st of March 2021. Do I have a mover? Councillor Clues. Councillor Sciano, seconded. Any discussion? No? We'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Those minutes are confirmed as a true and correct record. Announcements by presiding person without discussions? No, thank you. Petitions, deputations and presentations. I believe we do have a deputation from the Road Safety Action Group. Is that right?
Tony Steinbrenner. I've lived in Malacup Road, Capel, in the rural area for 17 years. I'm Vice President of Capel CWA, and Capel CWA was concerned about the safety of Capel residents and the difficulties entering and exiting Capel onto the Bustle Highway because of the 110 per hour speed limit. After hearing Adrian Warner, CEO of the Road Safety Commission, who's partnered with CWA, speak at our statewide AGM in December 2020, we decided to take action. After we sent a letter stating our concerns to Michelle Roberts, Minister for Road Safety, and local politicians, we had a meeting with the Honourable Colin Holt, MLC, who responded to our letter, and a meeting followed with Mia Davies, leader of the National WA Party. That was held on the roadside about our concerns. We then set up a community-based action group. This group is named the Capel Road Safety Action Group, decided to highlight this road safety issue and drafted a petition to the WA Legislative Assembly urging main roads to reduce the speed limit from 110 to 80 kilometres per hour for the intersections in and out of Capel, that is, between Capel Drive North and Spur Street South. This petition, of which you have a copy, I believe, Talia said that she would be handing you a copy, was handed over to Colin Holt yesterday to be tabled at the Legislative Council, and it had 810 signatures. As a result of a motion which we sent to CWA to be considered for the CWA State Conference in July, CWA of WA Inc., State Office, considered that the safety issue was too important to wait until July and immediately sent a letter to the Honourable Paul Papalia, MLA, Minister for Road Safety and Police, urging a reduction of the speed limit on this stretch of the highway. And a copy of this letter has also been sent to the Honourable Rita Safiotti, and Minister for Planning and Main Roads. We understand that there are many factors which will influence any upgrading work which will need to be done on the highway in the next few years, especially with the completion of the bore in early 2024, when Bustle Highway may be upgraded to freeway status. The growth that Capel, as a growing community, has had and will experience in the near future, and the increase of tourist traffic using the highway will mean that this upgraded planning must take place. But while we wait for the inevitable planning, consultation and funding that will go with any upgrading plans, Capel residents still face these safety issues daily as they exit the town to go to Bunbury or Bustleton for medical appointments, shopping, etc. Residents living on the west side of the highway, including the township of Peppermint Grove Beach, need to navigate 4 lanes of traffic travelling at 110 kilometres per hour to enter Capel Town to collect their mail, go to the library or to the council. A lower speed limit, while not preventing accidents from happening, will greatly reduce the impact of these accidents. In the event of a collision, the forces brought to bear on the bodies of those involved will be almost halved, with 30 kilometres per hour reduction, in all likelihood increasing their chances of survival. A lower speed limit will also increase the time and distance available to avoid a collision in the inevitable event emerging drivers are careless or distracted enough to make a dangerous miscalculation or break the law. In conclusion, the community has said, help to keep us safe by reducing the speed limit, with 810 people signing our petition. CWA of WA Inc. State Office has urged the WA Government to take action and reduce the speed limit. And now we ask Council to add their voice and help to keep the residents of Capel safe by working with main roads to reduce the speed limit on Bustle Highway.
Okay, thank you very much.
I suppose I should point out first off that I'm not a member of the CWA, but I am a member of the Capel Road Safety Action Group. And I just want to say a few things to reinforce what Tony has said by way of the past, the present and the future. the past government of the day got the main roads to create Kwinana Freeway, then to Forest Highway down to Mandurah. In doing that, they created overpasses, merging lanes, and set up traffic lights, etc., right down to Mandurah to make it safe for everybody that's on the freeway and safe for all people going over the freeway. Then we come to Old Coast Road, where it meets Forest Highway. Approximately 5 deaths happened within a period of time at that intersection. The first thing that the main roads did after a long consultation, they reduced the speed from 110 down to 80 for the people travelling north and created merging lanes for traffic travelling south. So they fixed the situation there. Then we come right down to Australind, and the speed limit was reduced from 110 down to 80 due to the fact that it's a built-up area, which is only natural. But some time back, it stayed at 110 after you went through a certain section of the 80, and you went back up to 110. So then we come to the present. The present was Hines Road and Forest Highway. I think it was approximately 2 people were killed at that particular intersection. First thing they did was reduce the speed from 110 down to 80 and created all merging lanes, etc., to make it safe at that particular intersection. Then you move to the other end of Hines Road and you come to Martin Palooza Road at Hines Road. There was an intersection there not so long ago. 2 people were killed within about a period of about 4 weeks. So after long consultation with people pushing very hard, the speed limit was reduced down to 80, from 110 down to 80 on that particular part of the Southwest Highway. You now travel to Busselton, and approximately 3 kilometres out of town, out near the school out there, you reduce to a speed limit of 90 and then down to 70 for the fact that you're coming into a built-up area. So that's the way they fix that situation there. Sort of digressing from that a little bit, just recently I watched a school bus come from Stirling Road out here into town, loaded with kids, hadn't come into Capel. This is in the afternoon. First off, he stopped at the intersection of Stirling Road, had to get through traffic from Busselton, doing 110, gets to the centre of the road, is on about a 45-degree angle to travel across 2 more lanes, then a 3rd lane to be able to turn into Spur Street and come to town, with traffic coming at 110 from Bunbury direction right behind him. And I don't think that's a very safe situation. I would have thought the Education Department would have done something about that situation, but that's the way it is at the moment. You travel to Boynup along Railway Road, which the main roads have now virtually made that to a heavy haulage road, and you get about 2 kilometres out of Boynup and you're reduced down to the speed of 80 to go into Boynup. They claim that that's a built-up area, so therefore they reduced the speed limit there to protect those people. You look at Capel itself, you go Goodwood Road, coming into town which is a main road as well. It's reduced down to 80 kilometres, about 2 kilometres out of town for a safety reason. You're coming into a built-up area. So this dropping the speed doesn't seem to be a problem when they want to do it. And I reiterate what Tony is saying. This highway is the main artery to the people of Capel and Peppermint Grove for all sorts of things, such as shopping, medical, sporting, entertainment, dining, picking up spare parts, whatever. These 2 cities, on either side of us, are the mainstay for the people of the Shire of Capel and Peppermint Grove. Under these perceptions of a built-up area, that Capel and Peppermint Grove and surrounding areas connecting intersections with Bustle Highway, these are more than what is required to be considered as a built-up area, going under the strains of those other intersections that I mentioned to you. To the future, we have a road count in 2017-2018 was 15,000 of vehicles per day. That recently was put up to 17,000 vehicles per day. That's an average. And so that will only increase as time comes by. And the reason that will increase is because Capel is going to expand. We already have subdivisions going on in town here. There will be more subdivisions, and it is town scheme number 8. You've allocated more area for future subdivisions. Plus, there will be subdivisions in Busselton and Margaret River, which creates more traffic travelling from there through to Perth, which is our major city. The next is the Busselton Airport. It's now becoming a very strong centre for fly-in, fly-out people. And those people are not just coming from Busselton, they're coming from all sorts of areas around us to catch their planes to go north. There is a state promotion of tourism of Busselton, Dunsborough, Margaret River, just wanting people to travel south. Where are they going to come? They're going to come through our intersections here. In conclusion, it is safety for our residents of Capel and Peppermint Grove and surrounding areas that we need to drive this run that we're on to try and get the speed reduced, and we will never deviate from that. We're going to work hard, and we hope that the council is behind us and will get with us and help us drive it through to get it reduced from 80 to 100 until at such time as main roads make provisions better than what they are at present. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Points well made. We move on to motions of which previous notice has been given. 11.1. I've put forward the following motion: that the acting CEO be requested to undertake a review of the organisational structure of the Shire of Capel. 2. The review in Part 1 above shall be referred in the first instance to as many council workshops as considered necessary by the acting CEO, such that a final report can be considered by council at its meeting scheduled for 28 July 2021. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Noonan, thank you. Yes, this is a sort of cut-down version of a motion that I previously brought to council with the same intention, and it is that it's been, I think, a little bit more than 2 years since this issue was last addressed. It was in a different time with a different council, and there's been a lot of water under the bridge since then. And I think it's time for the council to exercise its role in resetting the benchmarks and what we're working on the strategic review at the moment, and so it's time for us to reset what we consider would be a appropriate organisational structure and an appropriate staffing population of that to carry out the functions of the Shire. This is something which the Local Government Act says clearly is our job. It says we have to do on a regular basis, and I've talked to the CEO about it, and he has no problem in undertaking the review. And I think the only other issue that's been raised is a couple of people have said, oh, why don't we leave it for the incoming CEO when we get one? And my response to that would be that I'm sure he will have a lot to deal with in his first few months here. And he would probably appreciate having a structure in place that he could work with for at least a year or so. And then if he thought changes were needed, he could come and speak to council about that. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to endorse the motion. I think it's a good one. I think it is a useful thing for organisations to have to do these reviews. I think any incoming CEO, he or she, would be, I think, grateful to have this information, this structural review, as one of the pieces or documents that have been prepared by the acting CEO. Acting CEO Rob Stewart has been here for a substantial period of time now. He has a good understanding, I think, of how things work, and I would certainly appreciate his insight. And if I was an incoming CEO, I would appreciate having the insights of the acting CEO in terms of the structural review. So I endorse the motion.
Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone else for? I saw Councillor Clues first.
Thank you, Mr. President. Question, if I may, through you. If the acting CEO were to decide in his review that the timing's not right or it's inappropriate to change anything or anything like that, that would simply be the outcome of that review, or do I understand correctly?
Acting CEO, I'm not sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Clues, for the question. I would adopt an attitude to this review based on first principles. That is, I'd look at the existing structure, I'd look at existing staff establishment, and look at job descriptions, look at the strategic plan, and make judgments based on that, and what the council intends to undertake to its corporate strategies. So I can't predict what my answers would be.
You want to keep going, Councillor Clues? Councillor Kitchen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do speak against the motion. Look, I do agree the organisation is in need of a review into our structure going forward. The main issue I do have is just the timing of it. We are set to appoint a substantive CEO. We don't yet know who that individual will be, but they will have a certain way they like to conduct business, and it would be appropriate for them to then set up a structure in a way that would allow them to deliver the goals of this organisation. We are, yes, currently working on the strategic community plan. That's still in draft. That will be eventually brought forward to be formally adopted, and that will be resetting the organisation's outlook. Following that, the corporate business plan will also be done, and that will actually set out a financial pathway forward for those goals to be delivered. We don't yet know what that will look like, but the organisation structure, which now might fit it, might not, a review into it now might fit it, might not, it will need to be done when those documents are done. That's when it's appropriate. I think we've got enough issues before us to assign resources to before we look into a current restructure review. So I'd encourage the council to not support this recommendation just at this time.
Anyone else wishing to speak for or against? If not, we'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? That's lost 2-4. Is that right? What? Yeah, can we get the names? So it's Councillor Clues, Councillor Southwell in favour. No, sorry, Councillor Noonan, Councillor Southwell in favour. The others against, is that right? Any questions of which previous notice has been given? No. 13.1, the 2020 compliance audit return is back with us. I believe that, well, I'll get a mover first. Councillor Kitchen, Councillor Clues. Yes, please, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I apologise that we have to go through this, but the motion that was adopted by the council last month, there is a proposal that that motion be revoked and replaced with a new motion. So on page 16 of your agenda at the top of the page, it says that the following council decision, blah, blah, that the compliance audit authority to sign be revoked. The Shire President requires a third of councillors, whether the position is vacant or whether they're here or not, so we're talking about 3 councillors, to indicate now that they are in favour of the motion to be put. Then the Shire President can call for a mover and seconder for last month's motion to be revoked. Once that is carried by an absolute majority, so 5 councillors need to vote in favour of that, we can then move on to the amended compliance audit report, which could be moved with the amendment, if you like, that we spoke about earlier.
Okay, so I have an indication from 2 councillors, Councillors Kitchen and Clues. Do I have a third? Councillor Andrew. So we can proceed, and so the move would be the same. Councillor Kitchen seconded, Councillor Clues. Is there any discussion? We'll have a vote. Those in favour of the revocation motion, that's carried unanimous. We then would move to the new compliance audit return as per Officer's Recommendation 2.13.2.
So, Mr Chairman, there was a...
with an addition.
In accordance with our discussions yesterday, there was a request by councillors to include the optional questions of the compliance audit return. That has been distributed to councillors, so it's quite okay, Mr Chairman, for that to be moved with those optional 10 questions included, and we will just put a reason for change into the minutes of this meeting. So the councillors are aware, a mover and a seconder in line with the information that was distributed to you earlier today, this afternoon, which includes those 10 optional questions in accordance with the request from the council yesterday, or from councillors yesterday. Okay,
So do I have a mover to move that they wish to move the officer recommendation, but adopting in the attached compliance audit return the list of 10 optional questions with answers provided? Councillor Sciano, seconded Councillor Noonan. Councillor Sciano?
Yes, thank you, Mr President. So I'll move the alternative officer's recommendation, which is that 1, the 2020 compliance audit return as attached be adopted, and 2, the Shire President and the Acting CEO be authorised to certify the compliance audit return for submission to the Department of Local Government, Sport and Culture, including the responses to the optional questions as follows: questions 1 to 10 listed as part of the officer's recommendation. I've nothing further to add.
Seconder was Councillor Noonan.
Yep, I concur.
Are there any other speakers? I suppose I'll speak only just to note that I don't think we should let this go through without noting that we discussed this last time at the last Ordinary Council meeting, and I suggested then that that there was a problem, that we should look at it, and I was overruled. So I just hope that I suppose what I'm hoping that would come out of this is that it's a learning experience for us to learn that sometimes when an alarm is raised about something being not quite right, then we should take a precautionary approach and rather than sail on.
Sorry, question.
Sorry, Councillor Clues, you have a question?
Please, yes.
For me?
Through the chair, yeah. So I just wanted to confirm, I just noticed looking now at this new paperwork that there's a officer's recommendation 13.2, but there's also an item 13.2 on tonight's agenda. Will that be an issue?
I'm sorry, I don't know what you're referring to.
Sorry, I just heard over my shoulder that it was a typo, and I think it's been corrected as we speak.
Okay, well, if there's no further, there is no further discussion, we'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Now we're moving to item 13.2 in the agenda. Ludlow Vista Basketball Court. Would I have a mover for the officer recommendation? Councillor Clues. A seconder? Councillor Sciano. Councillor Clues, do you wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Sciano. Right. Any other councillors wishing to... Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to foreshadow an alternative motion, and so I would ask councillors to defeat the motion that is on the agenda, and in order to consider an alternative motion along the lines of that, in the light of the noise report attached to the officer's report relating to the noise of the basketball being played on Dabloan Vista public open space exceeding assigned noise levels, that the basketball ring, pole and backboard installed at Dabloan Vista now be removed.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mogg. Councillor, sorry, I think I've gone too early with the seconder on that one. I think we're going back to the substantive motion, which is the one that was moved by Councillor Clues, seconded by Councillor Sciano, and I'm asking whether there's any discussion on that from anyone. I have a bit of discussion on it. I would be voting against it anyway, because of doing some research on this since it came up again. We've had this here before and it's come up again. In terms of noise readings and decibel levels, it seems that the EPA, the WA EPA, under the Environmental Protection Noise Regulations of 1997, is the authority which should be adjudicating on this matter, and I don't think it is council's role to adjudicate on a matter of noise in the community. I think it's the council's role, and we all accept probably that it's one of council's role, is to provide recreational areas for parks, gardens, recreational things, skate parks, basketball hoops, footpaths, so that people can go out and get exercise. If there's any noise caused by those and they're causing a nuisance to anyone, that issue really should be reported to the environmental authorities and handled under the environmental protection regulations. So for us to be meddling in there, I think is something that we shouldn't be asked to do. We're not really qualified to do it or experienced in doing it. And what we are qualified and experienced in doing is working out whether a community has enough sporting and recreational facilities. And that's the question that we should be asking ourselves: is the sporting and recreational facilities that were provided at, in Dalyellup suitable and adequate for the community there? I think this is a question that's outside our remit, if you like. So for that reason, I wouldn't be supporting it, and I wouldn't be supporting the foreshadowed motion either. Anyone else? We'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? So it's lost 2-5. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman,
So yes, who voted for? Councillor Clues, Councillor Andrew, and the others against. now move to the, I believe, to the foreshadowed motion. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to move the motion that, in light of the noise report attached to the officer's report relating to noise of basketball being played on Dabloan Vista public open space exceeding assigned noise levels, that the basketball ring, pole and backboard installed at Dabloan Vista public open space now be removed.
Seconder. Councillor Mogg. Sorry, Councillor Noonan, I think, can speak first if he wishes. Or you'd like to leave it to Councillor Mogg?
No, thank you, Mr. President. This matter has come up before. The public would not, I don't think, would have a copy of the noise assessment report. I believe that's was a confidential report. It was done by a resident, but it very, very clearly indicates that the noise levels of a single bounce either on the court or on the backboard of the basketball facilities at Dabloan Vista exceeds the allowable noise levels, not only after the hours of 7 p.m, but in fact at all times during the day. And that's just a single bounce. So you can imagine the impact of multiple bounces and multiple impacts on the backboard, and it doesn't take into account the chatter or discussion or music that people playing basketball may also engage in. So when this matter first came before the council, we probably, I think, didn't pay enough attention to the recommendation at the time of the Shire officer, Mr. Chadwick, in whose opinion he made it very clear that it was, in his opinion, very clearly going to be over the allowable noise limits. Instead, I think we ended up getting too caught up on, well, what else could be done, and questions about providing sporting facilities. Now, we do provide sporting facilities. There are, as was pointed out in the previous matter, there are 2 other public basketball courts within 2 kilometres of Dabloan Vista. Now, 2 kilometres is a 3-minute jog. So it's not as though by removing this basketball facility that we're depriving the youth of Dalyalup of sporting opportunities. However, it is very much the case that because of the topography, because of the composition of the soil, because of a series of factors, that this area acts as an echo chamber or as a big funnel, and it very, very clearly is affecting nearby residents in a way that is untenable, to the extent that they would quite understandably make this significant investment in getting a noise assessment report, which they've presented to council. We have that information now. It's certified by a registered sound engineer. He's used very sophisticated sound recording instruments, and there's no doubt that just a single bounce of a basketball on the court or on the backboard well exceeds the allowable noise levels at all times of the day. So I think we would be remiss in our obligation to all of the residents if we were to simply say, well, you know, we'll let the EPA do something about it, because obviously they're not, you know, that's not one of the things that they do. They set the regulations, but they don't. You know, it's our job to look after the facilities that we provide. So I would encourage councillors to support this recommendation. This motion. Thank you.
Councillor Clues? Oh, sorry, Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I support the ostensive motion that Councillor Newton has presented, and I concur with his sentiments and words mentioned and on the situation, and the motion will intentively sort the situation out, and I ask for councillor support. Thank you.
Councillor Clues.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, kudos to Councillor Noonan. If he can do a 2-kilometre jog in under 3 minutes, I'm impressed. Very well done. Yeah, look, I'm in support of the motion. I'll be sad to see any sporting activity rec type things removed from the community. I just hope that we have something else before council shortly to give us some options on what we can do to return some amenity to that area.
Councillor Sciano.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. In a shock plot twist after my contributions to the debate last time this item came to council, I too support the motion presented by Councillor Noonan. I feel that upon receiving and in light of the noise report that's been provided, and also in discussions with the ratepayer as well, that though I understand this is probably not a favourable outcome for part of the broader community, my concerns come down to the compliance and the responsibility that we have as a local government to provide compliance, infrastructure and activities within our Shire. To be able to have an independent noise report in front of us, and obviously commend the complainant for digging into their own pockets to do so. We have a very clear understanding and picture of the noise and the issues that occur within that area, and obviously the acoustic the acoustic surrounds as well. Of course, I wouldn't have supported this without feeling confident that we have exhausted practically all available options. We've obviously had a discussion about alternatives for the site, and at this point I feel that there's not an appetite for any further expense. But, and I made the comment last time, there are alternative surfaces for basketball courts that are used in high population areas or in tourist parks. I've done my research into those, but I think considering the then concerns with a significant amount of the noise coming from the backboard, there's very little to nothing that can be done to resolve that. So
I think there's an issue larger than just the basketball court here. I'm not satisfied in my deliberations to take away a community asset, which from the last time we looked at this and the prior recommendation, which was defeated, that wasn't really going to fix the problem there either. So I think the path that really hasn't been gone down, quickly checking the last time we looked at this in the agenda, was issue larger than this, especially when the noise is being exceeded 24/7. 3 minutes, but I can't. So, you know.
Thank you. Yeah, I very much share Councillor Kitchen's concerns. As I mentioned earlier, the loss of this kind of sporting amenity is troubling for me as well. So I wouldn't like to... It's clear something needs to be done. There's a noise issue here. I think something should be done quickly, but I don't want to have this sit empty and vacant and untouched for years to come. I'd like to see us getting on with some possible ideas for fixing the situation. So I think that sort of ties us into coming up with some things and doing some things sooner rather than later, hopefully.
Councillor Noonan.
No, thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Councillor Clues. I think workshopping it for alternative uses is a very good idea. I'd support that amendment.
Councillor Clues, you want to clarify the wording of your amendment?
My question is, we're talking about Dublin Vista, so alternative amenities or facilities for Dublin Vista POS, not elsewhere.
Yes, relative.
Thank you. That's fine. Thanks.
So we're at the point of wondering if anyone else would like to speak for or against the amendment. Well, I'll speak against the amendment because it's an amendment to a motion that I'm opposing as well. So, and I'll speak against it because I want to make. I hope council think about this and don't think about this in terms of, here we are, third time in a row we're talking about a basketball hoop. It sounds trivial, but it's actually this is actually a really important motion. This is probably the most important consideration we will have tonight, because it's a fundamental question. It boils down to a lot of fundamental questions, doesn't it? It boils down to what is our role, what is our responsibility, who are we answerable to, who are we here looking after? We've got a resident or two who are clearly aggrieved. We've got other residents around who are quite comfortable with the situation and wish it to continue. Then we've got the wider community to consider, and our role in providing amenities and facilities, and that's one of the very important things we do, and council does. And it's public open space, and the more things we can put there for people to enjoy, the better. So it's a really, really important question, not one to dismiss about, what can we do about this baseball ring, just so we can. And I think I'm hoping councillors are not coming here with preconceived ideas and thinking, look, we can just get this off our plate. It's been on our plate. It's a basketball ring, for God's sake. It's been on our plate for too long. I think it's much more important than that. It's okay that we go through this properly and exhaustively. And I feel a little bit responsible in a way, because at last time it came here, I was talking about it being too noisy, and I said, well, we don't have an independent assessment of the noise, and so that may have been done in response to that. But then we get the independent assessment of the noise, and I look at it and I think, well, we're really not the authority to be checking on noise levels and being responsible for noise levels. There's the state government authority. State government authority is responsible for that, and really, when you think about it, we're the defendant in terms of the noise. If the environmental protection authorities were convinced that there was too much noise coming out of that basketball play area, that's our basketball play area, this Shire's basketball play area, we would have to defend that allegation that too much noise was being made. And why would we be defending it? Because we want to provide facilities like that for people to use and enjoy, and for young people to recreate. So it is a very vexed question. I urge you to consider it very carefully between now and voting on the substantive motion. Anyway, that's all. Councillor Andrew.
Might as well, I'll just even it all out. I don't really like the amendment. I don't like the alternative motion. I have issues relying on a noise report that hasn't been done or sanctioned by council or been organised by staff. I don't know how independent it is. I'm not sure how much force or the conditions that were used in actually creating the report. And Councillor Southwell raised quite a good point in the context of, as far as we're aware, we're getting complaints from one resident. All the other residents actually like the basketball ring being there and they don't want it moved. We've just done a community survey. I can just imagine how much would get slammed if we made decisions based on what 6% of the population indicated they wanted and what 94% of the population indicated that they didn't want. And I feel like if that's what you're going to do, then you have to apply it everywhere and to everything. You can't set a precedent taking something away that the minority actually want gone, but the majority want to remain, and not have that flow-on effect.
Okay, thank you. We'll put the amendment then to the vote. Those in favour of the amendment? And those against? And so the two against were Councillor Andrew, Councillor Southwell. Otherwise, the others were in favour. So that amendment is carried and it becomes the substantive motion. I've lost a little bit of track on who spoke for or against the substantive, but I'm going to speak against the substantive motion. This is the foreshadowed motion. And the other thing I wanted to, I've made some remarks previously on the amendment, but the other thing I wanted to add was that, and Councillor Andrew touched on it, is precedent. Now, this is a sporting facility, makes a little bit too much noise. Can you imagine if Bunbury Council got a noise complaint from the people living opposite the two football ovals in the Shire, and they said on every Saturday there's way over the noise. They go crazy. Those football fans go crazy. It's way over the noise limits. We've had it tested, and it's too high. You've got to close down the football ground. Or if a skate park was too noisy, do we shut down the skate park? You know, it's because this is easy for us because it's just a basketball ring, but there's a principle, and once we go down that track, we're creating, as you said, creating a dangerous precedent. What activities in a public open space area may create a noise nuisance for nearby neighbours and may fall foul of the Capel Council with its strict enforcement of you cannot be disturbed by recreational activity going on in a public open space next to the home that you bought, knowing the public open space was there when you bought it. So I think we've got to think deeply about this. You know, I'm happy to prolong it, if you like. I should perhaps foreshadow a deferral and see how that goes. Because I think, and I get the feeling this might be carried tonight, and I think if it gets carried, I think it's not a very good look for us, and I don't think we have considered properly the issues that the one we haven't considered properly, I think most of all, is the relevant authority. We are not the relevant authority for noise. We're the relevant authority for people getting out and recreating in the community. We're not the relevant authority that looks after whether people there's too much noise and it's detrimental to their health. So having said all that and having thought about it as I'm speaking, I'll move a procedural motion that the matter be deferred to the next ordinary meeting of council. If we have plenty of chats in between council meetings. So do I have a seconder? Councillor Clues. Anyone? No, we don't speak on that. Any vote? All those in favour of deferring it to the following meeting of council? That's 4. Are those against? 3. That's carried. And the 4 in favour were Councillor Clues, Councillor Southwell, Councillor Kitchen, and Councillor Andrew. Thank you. Oh yeah. Okay, now we move to another 13.3, the Shire of Capel name change. I'm going to hopefully leave it to councillors to come up with if they want to move, what they want to move. Councillor Sciano.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to move alternative recommendation, which has been provided to councillors and I believe digitally for the minute takers. And I'll just provide what that recommendation is, that given the lack of support for the name change for the Shire of Capel, no further action be taken regarding A, background information on the current name, logo and branding of the Shire and the option to affirm them, B, background information on several alternative names such as the Geograph and Cooling Up and the option to recommend them, C, the opportunity for residents to make their own suggestions as to appropriate names, logo, brands for the Shire, and D, the opportunity for residents to recommend dual naming, such as Capel Cooling Up. E, acknowledge that any change to the Shire name will require a review of the Shire logo and branding, including updated Shire documents and signage. I note, though, that I will leave the last point out from my alternative recommendation, removing for a period of 12 months from the date of resolution.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Noonan. Councillor Sciano?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Some investigation into the name Shire of Capel name change. What they're doing is putting this issue to bed, and remembering we went through.
Put to one side in this motion, and I would hope that given the current environment where other government departments and institutions and public institutions around Australia are actively embracing the concept of dual naming, that we would perhaps reconsider that, but I think that it would be appropriate for us to do that at a later stage, to let this, as Councillor Sciano says, this resolution to be put to bed, so that people don't feel that, so that people are satisfied that they don't have to be concerned about this, something being done by stealth or by, by the council that they would not support. So I support Councillor Sciano's motion. Thank you.
Anyone else for or against? Councillor Andrew.
Thank you, President. I'll be voting against the motion, predominantly because I don't think that the one-line question in the community survey was what was truly intended with the motion. So I think kind of wiping off the entire intent of the original motion based on a response to a one-line question in the community survey doesn't really do it justice. Dual naming is a Landgate policy now as part of reconciliation and acknowledgement of the tens of thousands of years of Indigenous settlement and life that took place long before white settlement took place only a few hundred years ago. The fact that we have no recognition of that previous life and heritage, either in our Shire name or in our logo, I think is really appalling considering it's 2021. Having said that, I don't necessarily think that the first step in dual naming or redesigning our logo should be the councils or the community necessarily. I think it needs to be a conversation with Indigenous elders. There's a lot of cultural appropriation that goes on at the moment. White people telling Indigenous people what they should think or what they need or what they want. And I think the biggest gift that we can give to them, for lack of a better word, is a voice. And I don't wish to speak on behalf of them. What I would like to do is to give them the opportunity to come and speak and have their opinion heard on how they feel about dual naming. And so I think this motion just wraps up, if it was just to change the name, because I was never for changing the name, my intent on the original motion was about dual naming and about getting the Indigenous recognition that I think they deserve. So the motion, if it had have just been changing the name or the incorporation of geograph, I'd be voting for it. But because it incorporates the dual naming, I just can't support it.
Any other speakers for or against? I'm also, for the similar reasons, against, and I'd just like to point out that I think I moved the original motion, and the background to it was that Councillor Noonan and I attended the opening of the new local police station, and we noted on the sign, the Aboriginal artwork outside the sign of that police station, that they had included the words capel and cooling up. And I remember Councillor Noonan probably recalls it as well, and although unfortunately I can't remember the man's name, we spoke to one of the local Aboriginal elders. Can you help me with his name?
Yeah, that was Isaac Webb.
Yeah.
From the Underlup Association in Bustleton.
Yeah, so that's the guy we were talking to, and we were discussing the signage with him, and that's, to your point, Councillor Andrew, he suggested dual naming. That's where the suggestion originally came from. So it did go to your point that we were listening and we carried it forward, and we thought it would be good. And if this is why I'm voting against this motion, because this motion says, oh, we're going to throw out these A, B, C, D and E steps that this Shire voted to take before going to the community, and they unfortunately weren't done. And if they were done, I think the community result would have been different. It might not have been reversed, but it would have been different. The only other thing I'd like to note, since I'm on now, got started, I wasn't going to say anything, but now as I've got started, I didn't. I just want to note that, you know, at the agenda briefing, I referred to the original item. I'm thank the acting CEO for amending it slightly and coming to us with a new version, which is better. But in the original item in the agenda, I told the agenda forum that I'd written the notes in the margin using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. And an example of that is the graph that you can see. It still appears a graph. They could just one line, 76 people strongly opposed, only 9%, 3%, and 9% were neutral, 3% were support, and 3% strongly support. That could have been just written as in a sentence, but it's there in a graphic to make it look, you know, make it obvious as they can that this was overwhelmingly defeated in the question asked. But if items A, B, C, D and E were done as we requested before the community survey, then I think we would have got a different result. And perhaps the opportunity of achieving a dual naming has consequently slipped by for now, and that's why I also what I don't like about the existing motion we're debating is that Councillor Sciano left off the suggested period of 18 months that it lasts, a period of 12 months, because by doing that he's extended the resolution that forever we will no longer pursue these arrangements. And I don't like that. I think that we should reconsider them sometime in the future. We'll now put it to the vote. Oh, you want to sum up, Councillor
I've
Sciano?
got a right of reply, and I think Councillor Clues was hoping to add to debate as well, I think. Is that? No? Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. President. Of course, opportunity is a right of reply. I think the way that the motion was formulated has the fundamentals and, the fundamental purpose of the way that the motion has been formulated has been greatly overlooked. We've obviously had an in-depth discussion with the CEO, who has put the alternative recommendation in the format that it is to address the fact that there is currently an outstanding resolution before Council. Council had made a resolution. This alternative recommendation is not to squash the votes of any residents or peoples of our country or our shire. What it is to do is to address the resolution that had come before council earlier. All right, so these items, A to E, are items in which have not been actioned at this point, but what we are saying is, CEO, don't continue on with this process. We have surveyed the community. That resolution, we're bringing that resolution to an end. Now, it does not in any way prevent councillors from in the future bringing new items of business to the council. No one's voices here are being suffocated, apart from my own, by this very thick mask, as I've been in Perth most of the last couple of weeks. But what we are doing here fundamentally is addressing a resolution that was put before council and that council has adopted. We are not here to suffocate the voices of our people and our shire. And of course, I think we may have some motions later tonight that will begin to work to address some of the issues and concerns that have been brought to this council as well. And of course, we should always be looking at what we can do to better incorporate our First Nations people into the way we operate and the way we recognise where we live and we enjoy our lives. So I obviously ask council today to support the motion that is in front of us so that we can continue on from business of what this item has created, and with respect to the Shire President, obviously copped a lot of that flack over that time, and full respect to Councillor Noonan's words, we live in an incredible place where we've been able to ask the question, and the question has gone to the people, and the result is overwhelming and astounding, and I think the message is clear. So let's move on, and so I ask councillors to support the recommendation.
Just before I put that to the vote, I'd just like to ask a question to the Acting CEO, given that Councillor Sciano was giving us his interpretation of standing orders, etc., in relation to this. If the proposal is to no longer pursue and the time limit has been removed, would that in fact mean that if the council wished to revisit this, it would have to revoke this motion first?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The short answer to that is no, because this is a no action resolution. That is, if this was carried, I do nothing. In any case, if the matter came up again in the future, although no need to revoke, the preface could be, notwithstanding council resolution such and such, the council now resolves to such and such.
I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? The against was Councillor Clues, Councillor Southwell, Councillor Andrew. The motion is carried. 4-3. We move to 13.4, the policy review on legislative compliance. And I believe there's a typo in the agenda version, which has been corrected in a circulated paper. Do I have a mover? Councillor Kitchen, seconded Councillor Noonan. Councillor Kitchen, anything? Councillor Noonan?
No, thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, well, if there's no further discussion, we'll put that one to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried, unanimous. 13.5, the policy review of media contact. Do I have a mover? Councillor Sciano, seconded. Councillor Kitchen. Councillor Sciano? No further? Those, we'll have a vote. Those in favour? Carried, unanimous. The policy review, payment 4.16, payment to Chief and Deputy Chief Bushfire Control Officers. There's a policy review. Those in favour? I'm sorry, I'm losing track. Would there be a mover? 14.1. Yes, 14.1. It's about policy 4.16. And was there a mover? Councillor Noonan, seconded Councillor Kitchen. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll move the motion as read in the agenda, with the amendment, if I could, of removing the words ex gratia and putting in honorarium.
So you'd probably remove ex gratia and payment?
Yep.
And just leave it as honorarium?
Correct.
Okay, well, I'll second that. Sorry. Oh, yeah. Oh. So. Oh, okay. Right. So for the minute taker, what we'll do is we'll take it that Councillor Noonan has moved the motion as he has read it, not as it's printed in the agenda, and I've seconded it. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think the motion is a very good one. I think it's important that we recognise the hard work and the time that's involved in the roles of the Chief and the Deputy Chief Bushfire Control Officers. The fact that they're involved in virtually every fire, with every brigade, and I note that other shires around the state do various different things to acknowledge the workload that is involved in those two roles. The sum that's proposed by council of $3,000 and $1,000 is really on the, if anything, it's on the less than generous side in relation to some of the payments or honorariums, acknowledgement that are made by other shires. So I think that it's entirely appropriate that that the workload that is involved in those roles is acknowledged, and I think that this is an appropriate way to do it. And I certainly would like to express my thanks and appreciation to both the Chief and the Deputy Chief for the role that they have fulfilled over many years in the Shire.
Thank you. Yes, I support them. I don't support the motion, but I support the change you've made from the suggestion that it be ex gratia, because that's a problem I've always had with this policy, that it isn't ex gratia, because an ex gratia payment is basically a gift that is made on a one-off, usually a one-off basis, perhaps more often, but with no legislative or legal requirement for it to be made. That it's a gift, and as such, if we treated it as a gift properly, we would revisit this question every year of whether we wanted to pay the money. But it just happens as part of the policy, which defeats the meaning of ex gratia. So I'm glad I was at the agenda forum suggesting the word stipend or annuity. The word honorarium is probably covers it. But the reason, again, it just harks back to what I said about the noise, double line vista issue. The issue I have with it is precedent that it sets. Firstly, I've never understood the term paid volunteer. To me, that's a contradiction in terms. And then it sets a precedent. So we've plucked a figure out of God knows where of $3,000 for the Chief Bushfire Control Officer, and if you're a fire captain at a brigade, you get 0. I don't understand why the fire captain does a fair bit. He doesn't do as much as the chief bushfire control officer, but he does quite a lot, and he's going to have expenses, and he's going to have costs, and he's going to have travel and things that perhaps should be recompensed. So, you know, all along I've said, but to many deaf ears, that these people should just be putting in expense claims and getting expense claims like any normal organisation. But so this policy, right from the start, has stood out for me like a sore thumb since I got to this Shire, because it contains inconsistencies and it is a little bit illogical in some ways. You've addressed one of them by changing ex gratia to honorarium, but the other inconsistencies and the other precedents it sets, I'm still not comfortable with. I'd be very comfortable, I'd be more than happy to see the chief bushfire officer put in an expenses claim with dates and times and receipts, etc., for $5,000 a year, if that's what it costs him. And I'd be the first person voting for it to be paid in the payments when we come to the payments. And the same for the deputy chief, and the same for a fire brigade captain. If they've got expenses, they should put in expenses claims, and we should pay them. But this way of going about it just doesn't, has never sat right with me, and still doesn't. Anyone else? Councillor Andrew.
Thank you, President. Can I ask a question, please? Do or can the fire captains claim expenses?
My understanding, I'll pass you to the acting CEO at the moment, but my understanding, having made inquiries in the past, is do, no, can, yes. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to quote you any legislation, and I'm only speaking from experience, but in my experience, no. But if a...
Sorry, no to which word?
No to claiming expenses.
No, as in do or can?
In my experience, I've never experienced anybody ever claiming expenses. However, if a claim was made and it was legitimate, it would be considered.
So if I can assist with that answer, you'll note in our minutes, our agenda, that later on tonight we're considering payments made to people, so ultimately it'd be the council that would authorise a payment. Okay, so anything else? Okay, anyone else? Councillor Clues.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have several big problems with this, so bear with me. Firstly, the officer's recommendation comes along with an objective that I'm deeply concerned with, that we're being asked to recognise that the responsibilities and duties of these volunteers are more onerous and time-consuming than any other volunteer in our Shire. That is doing an absolute injustice to the dozens of volunteers that do a lot of great work, many of them spending far greater hours than any bushfire volunteer could possibly do. For example, Ray, that mans the marine radio 7 days a week, I forget the hours a day, I believe it's 10, it's many. And there's many more people like her, so to put that in there and expect me to, hand on heart, vote for it and believe with it and agree with it, I just can't do. This entire policy, there was no attachments for evidence to show any type of costs that are being incurred. There's no mention of what specific costs might be incurred. So I'm being shown a policy and then expected to vote on it based entirely on anecdotal evidence, which I can't fathom how I could make a correct and proper decision in that fashion. The policy statement, we're going to delegate authority to BFAC for them to decide how much money they wish us to pay their members. That seems unfathomable to me. Do we next go and ask the staff how much of a pay increase they'd like next year? This is I don't understand how that can be acceptable. What is there? What's the pay increase? They've asked for a pay increase this year. There's zero justification being made for a pay increase. Council hasn't had a pay increase. I don't understand why anyone thinks that at the moment there'd be a pay increase, and there's certainly no explanation as to why there would be. I think to recommend to do so is absolutely tone deaf in the current climate. Lastly, I don't know the words to say this correctly. I'm not happy that we're looking at a policy specifically for 2 individual volunteer positions in this Shire. I'd be more than happy to look at a policy for volunteers in the Shire of Capel, and any of them that can show that they spend hours, time, money, whatever it is that could do with a little bit of help, I'm happy to help. No problem, and if people deserve it, as I'm sure these guys may well, cool, no problem. But to only have a policy for them, I think is again tone deaf. You know, we're warned time and time again about not even being in conflict, but simply being in a position where a conflict could possibly be perceived. Time and time again, if there's any risk of conflict being perceived or possibly perceived, we must report it. This has got to be the most possibly perceivable conflicting thing I've ever seen at this table. It's unbelievable. Certainly, thank you. I think you'll understand that I'm against the motion.
Any other speakers? Saw Councillor Andrew first. Yes, of course.
I concur with Councillor Clues. I think rather than this policy, what we need is a policy that incorporates all of our volunteers right throughout our Shire, and any expenses that they incur, more than happy for them to come and be able to claim those expenses. But I do have an issue with singling out 2 people completely probably deserving of being able to be compensated for any expenses. But there's many, many, many more volunteers throughout our Shire, not just these 2 people. And I think they all need to be recognised in the same fashion, if for no other reason than for equity.
If Councillor Kitchen, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Look, I understand the reasons the councillors have to not support this motion, and in a lot of ways I do agree. There are people in this district who do absolutely fantastic work. They donate a lot of their own personal time and resources and money. This policy is not just one that's come out of thin air. It is a recommendation from the Bushfire Advisory Committee made up of the fire control officers of the district. They are not just random individuals. They are legislatively appointed individuals. They are gazetted in the State Gazette. They have power under state acts. So, and I just want to say that because I've heard this talk about the 2 positions up on the board tonight, and then the talk of the captains. Well, the captains aren't the next rank. The fire control officers are. And they're the ones who are making this recommendation. And this is a unanimous recommendation of the entire committee, of every single brigade in the district. So it is a policy, yes, that does single out 2 positions, but it's 2 positions which are significantly onerous. And it's not just time, it's not just how hard it can be, it's the fact that you're responsible for people's lives, for other people's lives that aren't under your command. You're responsible for assets, for livestock, and you can do, at some cases, hours and hours, day after day, protecting those things. And in those sorts of cases, $3,000 and $1,000 is nothing. But that is what the fire control officers of the district have recommended, because that's what they see as fit, as compensation. And I can tell you right now, if this policy was gone and there was no remuneration of any kind paid to the individuals, they would still be doing it tomorrow. And so would every single fire control officer and whoever eventually filled those positions, because it's certainly not why you do it. Anyone who volunteers for any sort of financial gain, I think they need to reevaluate what they're doing it for. But in comparison to other local governments, some don't do anything, some do far more, providing a vehicle even. But this is just a simple matter to recognise the humongous contribution that this office requires. And it's not even just during the fire season, it's issuing permits, going to people's property, and you're still at that point responsible when they light that fire on during the restricted season. You are still responsible. If you wrote that permit out to allow that person to light the fire with totally inadequate conditions, you will be hauled before the courts. You will be held responsible. It is not just a simple matter of volunteering. It is a very onerous task. And it is just a simple matter to say, thank you for the service you do. And if there is an appetite amongst this council to recognise the countless other volunteers in the district, and that's fine, and I'd be happy to support that, but separate the issues. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Councillor Noonan, do you wish to sum up? Oh, Councillor Mogg wishes to speak.
Thank you. Can I please make an amendment
You may.
to change the word duties in officer's recommendation to expenses based under the introduction, the last paragraph?
So the last line of the introduction paragraph, you want to change which words?
Duties to expenses based,
Yeah.
and take out the word honorary. Oh, sorry, I've got the word wrong. Change honorary to expenses based.
Acting CEO, I'll ask you in concert with the minute takers to sort this one out.
Sorry. Take out honorarium and insert expenses-based payment. Honorarium. It's the humongous one.
Councillor Sciano is moving a point of order.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Mr. President. I have a point of order under the Standing Orders Local Law 9.9 Amendment, Subclause 2. An amendment must be relevant to the primary motion to which it is moved and must not have an effect of negating the primary motion. It technically changes the objective of the policy, and I would argue that it changes the intent and negates the original motion.
No, that's not correct. I'll not. No, that's not correct. Councillor Mogg, do you wish to speak in favour for your amendment? No, we'll put the amendment. Those in favour? Who seconded the amendment? Councillor Noonan did. Those in favour? Councillor Noonan and Councillor Clues. Those against? Everybody else. So that's lost. We go back to the original motion. And I think, has everyone spoken that wishes to speak? But Councillor Noonan can sum up.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to concur with Councillor Kitchen that the role of Chief and Deputy Chief Bushfire Control Officers do have an extra level of responsibility involved. Decisions that they make can determine matters of life and death, and that is a very serious, can't get any more serious responsibility as part of that role that they take on, and I think that it's entirely appropriate that that be acknowledged. I just make the point that when I initially considered running for council, I wasn't actually sure whether councillors got paid or not, and so it was a very welcome surprise to realise just how well we are remunerated. And when I consider the work that we have to do in relation to the work that the Chief and the Deputy Chief have to do, I think that it is appropriate that their efforts be acknowledged. I would have been quite happy for it to be done as an expenses-based arrangement. However, that amendment was lost. I would like to point out, with Councillor Clues' comment, that the staff are more than welcome to ask for a pay rise. At any stage, you can ask for a pay rise. That request comes to the council, and the council makes the decision yes or no. So the fact that the BFAC recommends this as the payment, that doesn't change the fact that we have the ultimate, privilege of saying yes or no, or how much or how little it should be. I do acknowledge or recognise that there are other shires who are, that this is not a something that Capel is way out on its own by acknowledging the role of all these two positions, that virtually every shire does something. Many are far more generous than we are, and so I would commend the original motion that the council provide that honorarium payment to the Chief and the Deputy Chief, and I would ask council to support that.
Right, we'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? So it's Councillors Clues, Southwell and Andrew against, and the others in favour, and the motion is carried. 4-3. (14.2) The proposed restricted and prohibited burning periods. Do I have a mover? Councillor Kitchen, seconded Councillor Noonan. Councillor Kitchen, any discussion? Councillor Clues.
Move an amendment, please.
Yes.
I'd like to move that the dates be changed to basically things starting on the 1st of the month and ending on the last of the month, except leaving 14th of December and 15th December alone. So it'll be restricted 1st November, and then it'll be prohibited will end, what is it, 31 days in March? So it'll be 31st of March, and then restricted will restart 1st of April, and then end, well, it'll be 30th of April.
30th.
Yeah.
I'll second it. Councillor Clues.
Thank you. Yeah, pretty obviously just to hopefully make life a lot easier for the residents if they can just say that we can start doing things or finish doing things at the start and end of the month, rather than have a day somewhere is it today or not?
Okay, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. We'll put that to the vote. Those in favour of that amendment? That's carried unanimous, thank you. So that becomes a substantive motion, and the mover was Councillor Kitchen, I believe. No discussion. Put it to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimous, thank you. 14.3, the 2021-22 Bushfire Prevention Order. Do we have a mover? Councillor Noonan, seconded Councillor Kitchen.
Can I move a procedural motion, please?
Yes, what is it?
That debate be adjourned, so that's 12.1C. Debate be adjourned to the next ordinary council meeting.
Procedural motion, that requires a seconder. Yes, and I'll second that. So the question is that this item be deferred to the May debate on this item. Yeah, sorry, we've started debating it. So debate on this item be adjourned to the May ordinary council meeting. Councillor Clues, anything to say in support of that?
Yes, I guess after conversation earlier, I would like to go back to BFAC and have some further discussions around the best practices and FISA recommendations before accepting the one we've been given.
We'll put that to the vote. Those in favour of the procedural motion? That's those against? Councillor Mogg against, otherwise carried 6-1. The debate on that was been adjourned. 14.4, the 10-year program of works for public open spaces, 2021-2031. You have the recommendation in front of you. Do I have a mover? Councillor Andrew. Seconder. Councillor Clues. Councillor Andrew, anything? Okay, we're all okay with that. Everyone okay with that program of works? Put it to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimous. 14.5, the Ramsey Road rehabilitation and widening. Councillor Andrew has declared a proximity interest and has chosen to leave. Do we have a mover? Councillor Clues. Seconded Councillor Kitchen. Councillor Clues? No. Okay. I just have perhaps a question to the acting CEO. And that is, when we go down to the financial implications, he might have to redirect this to an officer, but it says that it's blown out a bit in terms of the council's contribution. So we've budgeted 224,071, and the second round requires us to fund a contribution now of 442,867. Can we have some explanation?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I have spoken with Kristen about this. I believe the extra expenditure revolves around only one tender being received, a price of gravel and other materials going up quickly. Hence, Mr. Chairman, the second part of that motion to be referred to the budget review scheduled at the end of this financial year. Kristen and I, in our discussions about this matter, are still very much of the opinion that if we're getting a substantial amount of grant funds, it's worth the council's while in finding the extra funds so that this very important work can be done. I don't know whether Kristen's got anything to add to that, Mr. Chairman.
So before Kristen speaks, I can ask a follow-up question. You can address that as well at the same time. So I understand there is this spike, if you like, in the price of materials at the moment caused by very high demand, with lots of projects going on, lots of stimulus packages being offered. Is there any feeling on whether that spike, there will be another side to that spike, and can we consequently look at perhaps delaying projects like this and not losing them, without losing the funding, delaying projects until the price of materials and labour and all those sorts of labour shortages, etc., all of the current constraints subside?
Thank you, Mr. President. Addressing part of your question, the potential to lose the grant. With this particular grant, there is no opportunity to defer. If we don't deliver by December, we lose the money. Other grants, other grant-funded projects, yes, we could defer. We only have one other major grant-funded project that is potentially on the books, which is the next stage of the Boyne Up West project. We don't have any other grant-funded projects outstanding at the moment, other than Roads to Recovery money, which we can allocate to any works. The spike in materials costs, my take on the market at the moment is that that will last at least as long as the bore, so at least 4 years, with some ongoing long tail of that because of the depletion of the resource in the market beyond that phase in time. I can't see prices returning to the levels that we have previously enjoyed for a long time. So the option was there, but unattractive.
Thank you. Do we have any more discussion? Who was the mover? Councillor Clues was the mover. Okay, in that case we'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried. This is 6 of us here. 6 of us unanimous, I suppose, without Councillor Andrew. Item 15.1, the shared use agreement of the sporting oval at Dalyellup College. Can I get a mover? Councillor Mogg, seconded Councillor Noonan. Any discussion? No. We'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. 15.2, the policy review concerning financial reports. Anyone? No, we don't have a mover. We do. Councillor Kitchen and seconded Councillor Mogg. Councillor Kitchen? Nothing. Anyone else? No. We'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? That's carried unanimous. 15.3, the fees and charges for 2021-22. Any mover? Councillor Clues. Seconder? Councillor Sciano. Councillor Clues?
Thank you, Chair. President, question, if I may. Sorry. Page 71.
Yes.
The hard waste, not the hard waste, what's I looking at? The refuse site charge of $80. I'd just like to, if we can get a breakdown of what that money is to cover the cost of, I guess.
Yes, as I understand it, it's going into a fund, a reserve, and yes, it more than meets our requirements, but it's being used for future needs. And I'll refer that to the is it the Director of Community Corporate? Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Clues. Councillor Southwell is quite correct. We have actually retained the same amount for this financial year in light of how the reserve is looking, and in cooperation with the officer, he doesn't envisage any further increase for this financial year, possibly the next. But if you would like more of a breakdown on that, I could obviously provide that.
Thank you. Yeah, please, I think some more information would be good, and in fact, I'd be keen to defer this item to next month to wait for that, being that we know we sat, well, I wasn't on this table there.
A minute. So what we'll do is
So-
you're moving a procedural motion
Okay.
to defer the
Okay.
item
To the next
defer
ordinary
motion
council
to
meeting.
the next ordinary council meeting, pending receipt of further background information. You can't move that because you're the mover. You're the mover. So I will move that procedural motion. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Noonan. So I think it's pretty self-explanatory. We just want to have another look at that with some more information on where we sit with that reserve and what our options might be. So are those in favour of the procedural motion? That's Councillors Clues, Noonan, Andrew and Southwell. Are those against? The other three, if you don't mind. Motion carried. Sorry about that. I think we're up to 15.4. Is that right or not?
Yes, that's correct.
Financial statements for March 2021. Do I have a mover? Councillor Andrew, seconded. Councillor Sciano. Councillor Andrew? Any questions, anyone? Anything else? Okay, put it to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. 15.5, the accounts paid during the month of March 2021. Do we have a mover? Councillor Sciano, seconder. Councillor Clues. Councillor Sciano?
No comment.
I have a couple of questions for the acting CEO, if he can. So we go to page 83. Down the bottom, counselling sessions for employee, $1,309. Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't we have any? Don't we have anyone in the building who can conduct a counselling session?
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe we have anybody in the building that's qualified to give counselling sessions. I believe these are counselling sessions undertaken through one of our peak bodies.
Yes, Director of Community and Corporate.
Hello, yes, thank you for the question. You're quite correct. They are an external assistance council that we, counselling service that we do have to go to, and we don't have qualified staff internally to be able to deal with that type of situation, so we had to outsource on this occasion.
Thank you. Just turning to page, the next page, 84 I think it is. At EFT 35741, we have flexi staff being paid for labour hire $1,801.97. There's a lack of information there. It's labour hire, but for what? And I think we've touched on this before, Acting CEO, that unless we get a little bit more information on that, it's very hard for us to assess that and say, oh, that's a reasonable expense, because it just says labour hire. We don't know what it's for. Director of Community and Corporate.
Thank you. Can I take that question on notice, please, and just get some more information and clarify for you?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Can I also ask the Director, perhaps as well, further down the page, employee coaching sessions, $1,320. What was the... a little bit any more information on that?
Yes, please. That'd be good.
Okay.
That'd be good. Thank you.
A bit further down, EFT 35751, main spray removal and treatment of stumps and fuel removal, 3,047. Where was that? This is the sort of information I need, just a location or a council-owned premises or something. Same
I'll
thing?
take that one on
Same
notice
thing?
too.
Okay. This is when we go to page 87 at EFT 35809, we've got Grants Empire and preparation for Building Better Regions grant, 3,366. Again, the same question is, do we have don't we have anyone in the building who can prepare a grant application for building better regions?
I'd have to take that on notice too, to do some inquiries into that.
And the acting CEO, perhaps, what's the purpose of EFT 35827 on page 88? Nomad drink bottle with Shire logos, 1,628. What was the use for those bottles?
Mr. Chairman, without any previous notice, I have to take this on notice.
Yes, Director of Community and Corporate.
Yes, hello. I believe it's promotional material for the community events.
Oh, so we just sort of give away the giveaways.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And just if you could note this one too, to add to the previous question about Grants Empire preparation for building better regions grant. There's another one on page 90, 3,366 for the same thing.
Okay, I'll take that on notice too and report back.
And just on a similar line, on page 93, EFT 35931, there's a payment to McLeod's barristers and solicitors, $3,559.07 for legal advice, but we're not told on what topic, for whom, about what, just legal advice. Acting CEO.
Mr. Chairman, as I said last time, if I could be given some earlier notice about these, I could make sure there's an answer for each and every question the councillors might like to raise at a council meeting, rather than the briefing session that we had yesterday for precisely these purposes. So I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'll have to take that one on notice.
Yeah, I apologise for asking the questions without any previous notice, but I had, until we got to the item in the agenda, I had forgotten that I had made some notes and I wanted answers, and I was just asking them to get them on the record, and to on the off chance that someone might have a existing knowledge of the answers for at least some of them without previous notice, but I will endeavour in future to always provide previous notice. Okay, that's all the questions I have. Is there any more discussion on that item? Councillor Sciano.
So as a mover, I hadn't taken the opportunity to speak yet. I could actually probably just answer a couple of those payments for you. I believe the stump is in regard to the stump that was removed at the Capel Rec Grounds. I believe it was actually around the day that we came to council last time, because David and I both asked the question, what was going on there. So that was probably that stump. Inspired Results is a personal development and training groups solely operated by Justin O'Hare, which I believe does some personal development. I obviously couldn't tell you the details of the exact course that was undertaken, but that is their core business. But yeah, also the stump as well.
Okay, thank you. If there's no more discussion, we'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Me? I'm only voting against because I'm waiting for the answers. So that's carried 6-1, with myself voting against. New business of an urgent nature, and I believe we do have some new business of an urgent nature. No, we don't. We have another public question time, if there's any on-the-fly questions. What's his name?
In reply to your response to question number 1 that I sent to you, I go to the last paragraph and it says, please note, there was a safety audit undertaken in July 2018. The audit did not identify any issues in regard to the speed zone. That's their opinion, it's not mine or the people of Capel's opinion, but what I'm saying is that this happened in 2018. Times have passed, we're 3 years down the track, and so I believe that audit report should not be considered, that we face this situation in new light.
Okay, Mr. Turner, thank you. You were given a really good opportunity to make a presentation earlier on, and this is a question time, and I don't hear you asking a question.
I asked to cancel, not to consider.
No, that's not a question. Anyway, Mr. Turner, thank you. You've made your point. You had a good go earlier on when we had a presentation from you. You're now making further statements, and we would like to move on with the agenda, if that's okay.
Well, if you've got more important
yes,
business...
we do. Yes, we do. Our business is quite important, yes. Notices of motion without notice. Hang on, hold on. Notices of motion for consideration at the next ordinary meeting of Council. Councillor Mogg.
Excuse me, Mr. President, can I please add one in for number 18?
You want to add? You want another one?
Yes, please.
Okay. Back to 18. Motions without notice requiring an absolute majority by Council.
Thank you. In light of the deputation from the Capel Road Safety Group, I propose that Council send a letter to the Minister of Main Roads advocating support for the Capel Road Safety Action Group and their concerns.
Mr. Acting CEO, would that automatically make you the author of the letter?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Noonan. Councillor Mogg. What's that?
Sorry, question. Does this item need absolute majority of council just to be heard?
My reading of it was that it requires an absolute majority to be passed, but I'll ask the Acting CEO for clarification if that's correct.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll just have a quick reference to standing orders. The only other time this has been done while I've been here, there was no absolute majority to get it on the table, but the motion itself was required to be passed by an absolute majority. But if you'd like to just hold on a moment, I'll just check standing orders. Mr. Chairman, it doesn't believe that there's any direction in the standing orders except motions without notice by absolute majority of the council. So, as I said, the last time I recall one of these coming up during my time here, the matter didn't require an absolute majority to get before the council. It was treated as being needing to be carried by an absolute majority to take effect.
Okay, if that's okay with you, Councillor Clues, we'll carry on that basis. And so we have a mover, which was Councillor Mogg, and the seconder was Councillor Noonan. Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like to highlight this concern that our people of our Shire have brought to us tonight, and our duty as councillors, as representatives of the people of our Shire, and the concerns they have for this incident listed in their petition. And all I'm asking is requesting that the council send a letter advocating for the support that council is listening to the people of our Shire. This concern and issues they have is highlighted, and it needs to be actioned, I feel, and ask councillors for support, please.
Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'd like to thank Mr. Turner and the ladies from the CWA for bringing the petition to council. It is, I think, a very, very important issue. I do believe that this a speed change outside Capel is well overdue. I was nearly cleaned, from personal experience, I was nearly cleaned up 20 years ago when I used to work down in Bustleton and lived in Jalora by a young chap pulling out of Capel Drive, and I am currently driving a bus up and down mornings and afternoons down to Bustleton and up to Bunbury, and it's very concerning, the number of the problems that we have on the road, the difficulty of having so many intersections so close together, the sheer population of people living in Peppermint Grove and in Capel who need to go from one place to the other. I think it's extraordinary that Main Roads has been so obstinate that they have recognised problems elsewhere, but that they often don't make decisions which would appear fairly obvious or fairly simple to make until there are fatalities and multiple fatalities. I would hate to think that that's what it takes to get a logical, sensible resolution from and action from Main Roads to lower the speed limit on this section of road. I think Capel deserves it. Capel is, and our Shire should not just be seen as a through road, a place that you can speed by, but we deserve, I think, every bit of recognition and consideration, as all of those places that Mr. Turner mentioned, all the way from Perth all the way down to Margaret River. So I would encourage councillors to support Councillor Mogg's motion.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Clues.
Thank you. We're being asked here to consider supporting an item that came to our table tonight. We're being asked to support an item without being given more than 2 hours whilst in this room, time to consider the item. Being asked to support this item without any time for an officer's recommendation, any of the normal things to ensure that we're making decisions based on facts laid out in front of us and not emotions and opinions. I will not do that in this room now. I will not do it ever. I'm happy to see this come to us with a report through the proper channels in a proper timely manner. I'm not making a decision on something like that without such.
Just before you do, Councillor Sciano, I'd just like to remind members of the gallery that there is a sign out there that people are not permitted to use any sort of recording devices in the gallery. And I noticed that one member of the gallery had a mobile phone, was using it, and these days a mobile phone is, as we all know, is a recording device. You can take photos, you can take video, and you can take audio with mobile phone. So that, in my view, constitutes an audio device. So I'd ask you to observe the notices about using. I didn't identify anyone. Well, now that you've self-identified, there's more than one person using a mobile phone in the gallery. No. Yeah, and also I'd remind the gallery that, you know, the usual decorum and order would be it'd be helpful if it would be observed, and if you are dissatisfied with what you're witnessing, then you know, you're not a prisoner.
Procedural motion, please.
Yes, Councillor. I said before I go to you, I'll say something. So Councillor Clues has moved the procedural motion. Yes, what is it?
Thank you. 12.1B, that the meeting now adjourned for 10 minutes.
Do I have a seconder for that one? Councillor Noonan, seconded. Councillor, shall we just put it to the vote? Okay, if you'd like to adjourn for how many minutes? For 5 minutes? A 5-minute adjournment? Then those in favour? Those against? So those against are Councillor Kitchen and Councillor Sciano. So it's carried. Oh, sorry. Councillor Andrew? He was against. And Councillor Sciano was against. Anyone else was against? No. So I thought it was carried 5-2. Yeah, that's what I said. Oh. I don't know how that slipped out. Okay, so we are adjourned for 5 minutes until 5 minutes' time.
Yeah, that's the shortest one.
Hey! Right, it was the suit. I realised it was much too fancy. I can't like it.
We were discussing the motion put by Councillor Mogg. I believe either Councillor Sciano we were up to.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I am not opposed to an item before council that is backed by a safer systems study approach, audit, an independent audit or an internal audit from someone such as Nicola Smith at Roadwise and other institutions that are available in and around our area. The reason I talk about these is because, and it's already been mentioned tonight, in 2020 I was contracted by a group of business owners and residents of South Western Highway, and it was my role to develop and deliver a successful campaign to have their speed limit lowered to 80 kilometres an hour. I have to admit, from the in-depth studies that I had done on that road with professionals in the field, that the situation there is not comparable with the situation that we have here at Capel Drive. Their situation involved blind spots along with 12 entry and exit points within a 1 kilometre radius, along with single lane traffic and narrow verges in an area that probably should have never been 100 kilometres an hour in the first place. And that brings me to, and that background allows me to probably look at items like this and think that there is a lot of work that is still needed to be done in this space. I've worked very closely with the Office of Colin Holt and the Leader of the Opposition, Ms Mia Davies, on this issue, and both of them have consulted me on the issue as well. The succession to Colin Holt, the Office of James Haywood as well, conflict there, but will also probably be looking to take that on from Colin. But I want this item to come back to council, but I want it to come back with a safer systems approach analysis of the road, along with some formulating or some a staff report. We have changed speed limits in this Shire before, and I've been very supportive and advocated very hard for those 40-kilometre speed limits throughout our town centres, and they were very, very strong cases built by the Road Safety Commission and by our staff, and they were not an easy feat to overcome. but we're there. They're a part of our life, and they make significant. They significantly decrease the risk of fatality in a pedestrian versus vehicle incident. I travel from Capel to Bunbury at least up to 2 return trips a day. In the 5 years that I've been a road user, I have had one very, very, very close incident. The incident did not have anything to do with speed. It had to do with a very dark grey vehicle tailgating a large ute. That ute pulled into the slip lane. Thinking that I was safe, I was not. The very dark grey Commodore behind that ute was still progressing to me at 110 kilometres an hour. I'm just as heavy on the brake as I am on the foot, and we both stopped in time. But I understand and I do recognise that some people have had very close calls across that intersection. And I do also recognise that the alignment between Stirling Road and Capel Drive is a major issue. And the speed limit, I think, will probably never go far enough to resolve that. I personally think that those 2 roads need to be aligned so that we can have very safe interchange from Stirling to Capel. I actually think it's even, it's quite a mess out there at the moment, even with the 80k zones. But yeah, I think don't take this as a rejection of the cause. I'm not going to support the recommendation tonight because I want it to come back to council in the same way that our group approached the Shire of Dardanup once we had done the work, once we had developed and got the advice from the Safer Systems Principal, which is for the Road Safety Commission. And that council was able to endorse a supportive, was able to support the cause that was the South Western Highway speed limit as well, obviously with much success and much pressure on parliamentarians and the Minister. So I ask Council not to support this motion tonight, not on the basis that this isn't the way to go, but on the basis that at this point I think we want more information to come. And that we should be keeping very close and working very close with the community groups, the CWA, the Chamber of Commerce and the Road Safety Action Group to help and guide them to develop those reports and so that we can bring them to council and have a united decision and progress on this. Thank you.
Anyone else yet to speak? I will. Don't take my contribution as a rejection of the cause either. But as I'm all about precedent tonight, I'm similar to Councillor Clues, uncomfortable with a process where we come to a council meeting, there's a presentation, we listen, and then on the same night we're asked to make a decision, which really puts, and this question before us requires council to decide a position on this issue. So I don't think it's, in terms of precedent, I don't think it's a good precedent that the council in one night hears a presentation, has a debate, and then decides its position on an issue, and once we take that step of writing a letter, that's our position until it's later if it's ever reversed. So I agree with Councillors Clues and Councillor Sciano that I'd rather take a more considered approach. And that we get independent and impartial information and do the research we need to do before we decide on our position, and then we convey it to the authorities. So with that, Mog, would you like to sum up? We'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? And that's lost with Councillor Mogg in favour. Thank you. We now move to notices of motion for consideration at the next ordinary meeting of Council. And Councillor Mogg, I believe, has one.
Thank you, Mr. President. I submit a motion for next council that, subject to a report being prepared by the acting CEO demonstrating feasibility for 1, a second flagpole being installed adjacent to the flagpole already in place at the entrance to the council's administration building at 31 Forest Road, Capel, specifically to fly the Australian Aboriginal flag, and 2, to place the word Kaya at all council buildings and library entry doors. Adequate budget allocation for the 2021-22 financial year be made.
Seconded Councillor Noonan. Councillor Mogg.
Thank you. Nothing more to say as read.
Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think this picks up on the point that was being made by Councillor Andrews earlier on in the night.
Sorry. It's been drawn to my attention that this is a notice of motion for consideration at the next ordinary meeting. I was racing ahead with consideration tonight.
Yeah.
So that concludes that one. That's something we'll debate at the next ordinary meeting of council, to be held on the 26th of May 2021. Now, do we have any items for consideration behind closed doors? I don't believe we do. So therefore, at the time of 9:49, we'll close the meeting. Thank you. 8:49, sorry. Signing. That was like a bloody roller coaster ride. Yeah, quite long.